I think it's an amazing conference, and there's always so much value in this sort of stuff because integration is one of the things that we all need, but we never talk about really. It's always an afterthought. So I cherish the fact that we're here together and that we can share some time. It's probably about 2 o'clock in the morning where I am, so jet lag is very exciting at the moment. So welcome and thank you. So today what I want to do is share with you my journey with Logic Apps and in particular custom actions that I've probably spent the last 3 years getting heavily involved in various systems and things like that. So in the medical space, you know, lots of, we don't talk about AI these days much, but do we? And so, you know, I love the advancements and I'm sort of in a lot of the private preview groups and all this sort of stuff. And I always sort of wonder about, you know, where's the value from AI coming from? And, you know, the fact that we've all got access to roughly about the same types of models. So, you know, how do you know if one's better than, by the way, my talk isn't on AI. But, you know, how do you know if one model's better than the other up front? And typically you don't. And then, so it's all about the data that you feed it and the data that you've got. And that's kind of your IP and that's your differentiator. And, you know, I don't know whether you've had experiences. I've got mine set to Jamaican, so I have a very nice conversation with it. And so, you know, my experiences have been, I'd like you to go and sort of, I got one of these old school things of, I was setting up a point of sale system and had a card reader device, and it came with all these C and C++ DLLs and a .h file in sort of C or make files and things. I thought, gee, that's been a long while. And so then I thought, I said to it, you know, extract all the functions out of that .h file and create me a beautiful C# wrapper. And so it went away and did it, AI, and so ChatGPT and whatever, and it came back and I said, fantastic. And I looked at the results and the functions were there was probably about 32 functions in there. And then in the .h file, there's about 84. And I said, you know, compare the output that you gave me to what was in the original source files, and please rate how well you think you did. I guess, oh, my bad, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. And so, you know, I'm just sort of wondering about how many times, and then you've got to kind of keep prompting it and going, and I'm coining this term an AI breath, because it's like if it can get it all done in one breath, then it's probably going to work. But if it can't get it all done in one breath, then I have trouble trying to link the breaths together. But anyway, let's talk about Logic Apps and let's go on a little journey together. So welcome, folks. All right, let's present. Over to you, Mr. Speed. Do I have to mirror? Great. Okay, wonderful. All right. So what I'd like to, you know, talk to you a little bit about. So yeah, lots of integration, and it's really important that what I do want to talk about is typically the why behind. Oh, there we are. The why behind what we're doing. So it's not just about using technology for the sake of using it, because in the room we could all come up with 100 different solutions to the same problem. So why do we use the things that we do, and why do we go about, in particular, the ways that the certain patterns and practices and things like that we use. So and so in terms of what I do, typically I run my own company over in Australia, and in the integration end-to-end delivery space, largely in the medical sort of sector. So you can imagine, yes, do I get a lot of requests for, can I build an X-ray machine, X-ray reader that sort of reads X-rays and tells you what's going on with AI. The problem about that is, certainly in the laws in Australia, is that we can use a decision support tool. We can't tell the medical practitioner what to do. So, and that's great, because oh, I'm sorry, I got it wrong, kind of, comes back, you caught me out on that. So I'm always kind of a bit dubious about that area. All right, so in terms of just a quick little bit, these are the people that inspire me and get and keep me invigorated in life, and they're sort of honourable child number one with cheeky grandma and daughter, and this is probably my dog, which is the only thing that listens to me at home. This is Nala, she's beautiful. And then a little while ago, just a bit of personal note, I did a swim from Bondi Beach to Watson's Bay, which is about 11 kilometres, and that was kind of on the bucket list and in a race and all that kind of business. So now I've decided to learn the guitar. And so brings me on to the start of the session together, and I wanted to talk about, the why, because the how we can all kind of figure out, and we can get experts and things like that, but why are we doing the things that we do? And obviously in our session together, I'm going to talk about logic apps, but also custom actions. And just as a show of hands, who's been using custom actions and that sort of stuff? Okay. All right, awesome. So that's probably about 50-50 in the room. So yeah, we'll find out a lot together. And so in terms of best practices, what I've really sort of just evolved on and seen what works, what sort of keeps me up at night, what doesn't, and then how do we extend all of this? And I'd like to bring it all together in a various, several demos and things like that. So when we go off and we start to build a solution, often we sit there and say, where do I start? And, there's the immortal words of just starting simple. So just get something going, start simple, build a wireframe, build a straw man version. And, in terms of if you've ever watched animators and things, they'll just build a wireframe and they'll draw sort of stick figures and things and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think of this scene? And someone will say, no, that's no good. Or yes, that's fantastic. And then they'll colour it all in and they'll bring it all to life. So in terms of integration, what I find is probably the thing that breaks the back of a lot of the challenges and problems that we come up with, or we face. And that is that if I can get a hello world end-to-end going, then everybody in that process has some exposure to what that integration is doing, what that connection is doing. So, very simply, you've got, if you're taking a customer order, for example, at the very beginning, it might be first name, last name. And then you might follow that all the way through to the different touch points, the connections, the firewalls might need to be in place. There used to be a time where we would be really excited when a file appeared in a folder. And we were just like, oh, this thing is fantastic. Nowadays, we don't do that. We sort of watch, REST endpoints and things. But, if I can get all the way to the end with this hello world from a customer, then the first name, last name, then the rest of it's sort of just amending to that. And I've done connections, I've done timeouts, I've done credentials. There's a whole raft of these things that, as integrators, we need to deal with, but typically, they should be in someone else's court, but they're not, because we're the ones that touch all these different endpoints. So start simple, and then just have some clear goals as to what you want to do. Call it a prototype, call it whatever you like, an MVP, a V1, however you'd like to do it. Because with integration, it can often get overwhelming, and it can, you can have all of these different sort of challenges. And, where do you sort of, in the world of ambiguity, how do you start? And often things aren't defined. I'd love to have a schema. In the last, I've been doing BizTalk and since the very beginning and all of this, and we lived and breathed by schemas. Have you got a schema? Have you got sample messages? And they're all compliant. Whereas in these days, we've got, document-based systems, no SQL, everything's JSON, and oh, I forgot to give you that field, I've added it to the next batch, and all this sort of stuff. So, I'd love to have schemas, but they're not as readily available as what they were, I've found in the past. And then even with, in the medical world, HL7 or HIPAA and things like that, there's an Australian version of HL7, there's a European version of HL7, and often because of the challenges of working with it, systems have just, oh, I was meant to put the person's alternate name into another set of fields, but comments were the most easy accessible field that I had. So you're dealing with all these little nuances around the place. And then, so in terms of, let's design something, prototype it, get an MVP out, get a V1. I know it's all, you've probably seen it all before, but it's really quite applicable in the integration world. And then put on some, just add those incremental gains as we go along. So in terms of, why Logic, and by the way, none of this is done with AI, my slides, I don't have all these wonderful sort of Lucasfilms animations and things. I've got a couple, but that's just the basics of PowerPoint and my skill set. So in terms of when we build a solution, and typically in integration world, the multifaceted problem I call it is, how do we go and build any solution? And now, and obviously nowadays more and more, we've got some sort of online exposure. That maybe it's a trading partner down the road, maybe it's a set of customers, maybe it's a SaaS solution that you're building and you're offering. And what that means is that it can be very lumpy in the sense that today you might have 10 people using it, tomorrow you might have 110,000 using your system. So, and yeah, we'd all love that, right? And then, how do you do that? How do we design for scale, but initially build for the one? So in terms of, I'm starting a new piece of work, maybe, maybe it's a startup that you're working in, maybe it's another business unit in a well-established company, and you're just saying, well, we'd like to build this new piece of functionality. How do we do it? And these are sort of non-trivial questions, but in the sense, obviously it's about Logic Apps, but in the sense of Logic Apps, it's a great tool to start with, a great place to start with, having enterprise scale at hand, like right from the very beginning, and it's not going to cost you the earth. So have a think about things like, what is the maximum capacity of your solutions that you've built? By that, how many concurrent calls does it support? That's typically one of the hard and fast measures that we use. And is that really important? Yeah, it is. And then, not only is it what you can support at the front door. So for example, you might have a payment gateway in your solution somewhere. And typically a lot of them handle all the transactions and they send you back webhooks and things like this. They send you back calls at some hour when you least expect it. So you get 2,000 calls back in that minute. And it's like, oh, okay, thanks for that. Did you want to give us a warning? But, the system should just handle it. So how do we handle that? So it's not only what you can support it at your front door, it's also what about the systems you're calling? So for example, recently I had a MYOB online, MYOB Advance, and it basically timed out once Logic Apps were making more than 20 concurrent calls to it. Can we up the plan? Can we do this? Can we do that? So, now you're trying to balance a table with uneven legs and sort of make the, balance it up and right size it and things. So how do we do this? But, ultimately when you walk around the office and you say, hey, we've got a problem, you get hit with, well, no, it works on my machine. What are you talking about? So that's sort of the paradigm in terms of, us building solutions, and we're taking sort of UI out of it and mobile and whatever else. But in terms of the engine and the core of what you're doing, I think Logic Apps gives you an amazing environment to at least start this sort of stuff from. Down the track, you know, maybe you prototype it in Logic Apps because it's very, very quick, it's visual, you know, it's you know, very handy from all of that. A lot of the time you might keep it there because of all the logging and everything else that you keep, that you have. We can optimize it. And obviously custom actions and things like that is what I want to sort of work on. But in terms of top reasons, things like, you know, I'm just going to go through these pretty quick, but low code and workflow automation. We talk about low code. Now there's code-oriented workflows, so I don't think low code I can use anymore. And that was the session just this morning. So, you know, in terms of visual designers, this is one of the areas that I love, and that is the fact that you can sit someone down and say, tell me what this workflow does. Tell me what this process does. The other day I got given 50 Azure functions. Some were on schedules, some were handling batches, and basically it was like, tell me why this Medicare payment didn't go through. I was like, oh, thanks for that. So, you know, everything's got its place, but yeah, that was painful. So, you know, obviously connectors, great thing in this environment, lots of investment in all those connectors and things like that. So chances are you're going to find them. However, in a recent project, I found that the service bus connector didn't quite give me what I wanted. And so I could have waited for a revision, of gone back to the team and said, hey, can you update the service bus connector? And maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't, and I wouldn't know the update, you know, the drop date and everything else. So I built my own custom action that used the APIs and then did something just on the service bus that I needed it to. And that was drop a message onto a topic. And so it was a particular, the challenge with it was that the client gave me a connection, a SaaS connection that didn't have all of the permissions that the out-of-the-box service bus connector needed. So, and they said, that's all you're going to get. So I had to sort of come up with something else. And that's where, you know, that went into it. So the other side of life is that we'd like all our solutions to be event-driven as much as possible. So, you know, we don't want to pull necessarily, we want things to push. And then, you know, various timers, serverless architecture, I love it. You know, don't have to worry about the things that we had to worry about in days of old. And then, you know, we can scale that up. And that's where that, you know, design for the many but build for the one initially comes into it. So we can scale that up, and we can really kind of, you know, use what's given to us in the Logic Apps world. And then, yeah, so automation, scale and things like this, so fully managed. And then I've just got a couple of others, and that is, you know, in terms of security, it's always a last minute thing that we think about, but great to have it in our tooling right from day one, in our environment right from day one. Makes everyone happy, particularly with all the ISO and compliance requirements and things like that. So start there, and however you want to do it, VNets and managed identities and so on. And there's been some great work in recent times around managed identities. So, you know, things like let's say your Logic Apps instance, or if it's Logic Apps Standard, for example, can go off to Key Vault. You can use a managed identity to access Key Vault and give it the necessary policy permissions and things like that. All right, I guess the other thing that I really like is the monitoring and diagnostics that we get out of the Logic Apps environment. I know, you know, App Insights gives us a fair bit, and there's a whole raft of other things. But these are all things that I want to do less of. I want this environment that I operate in just to have all of this, because I want to spend time writing code, solving the business problem, rather than I've got a fantastic logging look at the trace that it does. It does this and does, yes, it's awesome if we're in a university, project doing something as a group project in your garage. But, I want to get swimming or play the guitar. And so I want to be able to, hang that up when I can. Okay. So in terms of, just some of the things that you get from Logic Apps, I call it a gift. And that is, we typically go off and write some code and we go, look at this routine, it's awesome, it's great. Don't worry about what the code is. I've just got it there as I copied and pasted or did a controlled snippet, we call it. That's it. And so it's just got some code. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, maybe it finishes really quick, maybe it takes hours, right? And we do something and we spin it around and I actually wrote it, but it's just for an example here. And so go away, do something, and then there might be an error in there. And typically, with the lens of a developer, we don't see anything wrong with this code. And typically, that's sort of, and that'll go into production. It'll stay in production for a year or two. But sort of, how long is too long? And then we've got these sort of other things that we do. And this is a snippet of Logic Apps here, and I've got an HTTP trigger at the top. I've got some scopes in the middle there. I'm just let me have a look and see. So check stock, take and place an order, update the inventory, and then notify partners and send the result back. Might be fine. Imagine if that happened in your day-to-day life. So you walked into a shoe shop over here, New Balance, for example, and you went up to the front and said, I'd like these shoes. They'd say, great, thanks. How are you going to pay for it? I'll pay for it on card, pay for it. Hold on, can you wait for a moment? Just got to check in the back room, see what the minimum stock order level is. Goes back and checks. Oh, we're below 5. So hold on, picks up the phone, rings the supplier, says, we need to place a new order in. Meanwhile, you're at the counter. What's going on? Like, can I go yet? Yeah, I'd like another order. When's that going to come in? Tuesday? Oh, Tuesday's a bit long. Can we make it Monday? Maybe, but I've got to see whether Gary's working the truck. And you're like, can I move? And so it's not quite right, but it's just happened because it's evolved that way. And it's even harder to recognize when you're looking at code. So the gift that I call it is something like this, where we typically break up our process into what's critical. So check stock. Do we have your shoes in the back room? Process that order. Place the order and process it. Get you out of there. Then the next thing is the response. See you later. Goodbye. Thank you. Lovely. Hope you enjoy the shoes. Come and see us shortly. And then after that is the inventory and the stock management stuff and things like that. Now, this happens all the time. And what I tend to call it is the synchronous and asynchronous stuff. So in Logic Apps, we get this straight away. So I can have my process running. I can do a whole bunch of stuff after the caller is gone. And I could put that in another workflow and call it as a child or a subroutine if you want to get sort of nerdy. But we can do that too. But if you start to think about your integrations in the way with the lens of what's absolutely critical, what needs to be done right now, and what can I push off to later? And I'm sure we all do it in some way, shape, or form. Previously, we used to use queues and things like this to be able to put things on queues and then you'd receive it. And queues are amazing because they're shock absorbers. So if one system's running really quick and the other one's not so fast, then the queue will queue up and then the other one can sort of process in their own time. Or you could have more sort of helpers going on, more instances of the DQ or the consumer and that sort of stuff. Now, in Logic Apps, we kind of get that here, but not as full-blown. So maybe this is good enough for everything that we're doing. We typically would add a queue in here for order if we needed ordering to come in place. Or maybe you're reacting to one record being updated and there's like 50 updates to those records, to the one record, but at the back end you only need to process it once. So we want to sort of dequeue on the queue, and all sorts of other things that you can get. Okay, let's have a look at some best practices. So in terms of, our logic apps, what I'd love to do is have this standard repeatable workflow structure. Sounds good, right? You can go home and you say, well, if there's one thing that you learnt, it's a standard repeatable workflow structure. How's the conference today, honey? Awesome. You know what? I learnt a standard repeatable workflow structure. Here I've got, this is mine, and you would have seen Divya's recent previous presentation about templates and things. Start to explore those a lot more. So this is really just trying to give the workflow some sort of shape, some sort of structure, because not everybody are Logic Apps integrators and things. So when you're looking after a team, you might have 10 plus people, etc. You want them all to start to build things consistently. And this is a suggestion. It's nothing sort of hard and fast in this world. But, in terms of, I've got a scope there that does some initialization work. I've got maybe, hey, I'm about to run, log something, take in some input and say we're about to sort of process this. If we die halfway through, at least we've got some sort of record in a meaningful way. And then in the main loop, you go through, or the main scope, you go through all the work, and then at the bottom there, I've got two finalizers, and one is the happy path, and the other is the unhappy path. And that's kind of what I love to, what I try and set up all my workflows as. And we've got the notion of interfaces. It's sort of a dated term, I guess, but if we're building these processes, they could be interfaces that you're calling. They could be, sitting behind APIM. They could be an API endpoint. So they tend to sort of had the term interfaces in the past. And then, they're activated by messages or timers or some sort of trigger. They have some sort of processing. And then we've got, one or more outbound messages that we could use to send wherever we would like. So in terms of one of the things that I tend to do that sort of is more handy than not, and that is I like to create an interface table. So the challenge with Logic Apps is you enjoy it so much, you blink and there's 50. And you're like, oh, where did all these come from? And then you've got to be creative on your naming convention. And then hopefully, if you didn't do all of them, the other people that did kind of talks the same language as you. And some have uppercase and some have lowercase, and suddenly you've just got a mix. And you're like, when did I start learning Spanish? When you're looking at all this stuff. So this is not rocket science. It's sort of something that evolved from history in my sort of world. And these are just some way of being able to capture what you're doing in the integration world. Because good integration, no one notices. Bad integration, everyone tells you about it, right? So over on that left-hand side, in the first column, I've got an interface number. And don't worry about trying to read it up the back of the room. I know that you're going to have your carrots tonight. I'll save you the hassle. And so in the interface number, I've got 1, 1.1, 2, and 3. So I used to just go 1, 2, 3. And then they go, but hold on, when we've got customers coming from this county and this area, they're different. I go, but I've got 1. And then 1.1 evolved, like this is something slightly different. And then I've got 2, which is another area, which is sort of process and SMS. In the next column's the name. And then 3 is a pay webhook, which is just sort of talking about the examples that we had together. And then as you go across, it's kind of like, which system is it coming from? Where's it going to? What's the format? Do I need to transform it in any particular way? So it's really just something there that you can give as part of your team, part of the business, the technical leaders, the business managers, and those sorts of things to say, here's what we're doing. And then the most important part is that last column, which is do you have samples? Do you have message samples that you can try and bring all this together in? All right, got to get moving. So in terms of, modular design, don't go and put 300 shapes on the design surface because you can. I know you get sort of, you win the office competition for it, but just, keep it simple. We parameterize. The Visual Studio Code plugin does a really good job of that these days. Leverage that more and more. So, have your parameters, various connections, things like that. Hard coding URLs, yeah. I had to put that in. That's really my mental note. There's a lot. Why are we hitting test? We're in production. And oh, yeah, I forgot the URL, didn't I? Yeah, okay. And then, we've got security, so use Key Vault where you can, APIM, sit it behind there. And then, things like performance and reliability. So that's a really important point. The other side of Logic Apps is, it's pretty durable. Like if something goes thump in the middle of the night on it, kind of picks up and resumes where it kicks off from. And, sometimes there's lots of hieroglyphics on the screen that come past, if you've ever seen it. And you go, whoa, what's just happened? Or is it good? Yeah, then green comes back up again and you're like, yeah, we're fine. Okay. And then, so obviously you're monitoring, always get App Insights or some sort of logging diagnostics in there just to start off with. Don't add it as an afterthought. Always just, set up that environment first as you're starting to kick things off. Some sort of naming convention that you all sort of can get behind and understand. And then, we always go about testing things. So recent developments in Logic Apps, particularly from Visual Studio Code, allows us to go and build unit tests and those sorts of things. So, incorporate that into what you're doing. So now I'd like to just talk about the extension of Logic Apps. And so we've got stateful, we've got stateless, we've also got agentic, as we're starting to see more and more of these loops. I mentioned a little bit about the workflows, the templates there, and then I won't spend too much time on this. I do want to get onto the code. So in terms of extending, our common avenues are things like inline scripts, right? So in terms of extending what your workflow does, you could jump in and create an inline script. Problem is, it's just very point oriented. It's right there in the middle of that workflow, hard to reuse, hard to share. What we're trying to do is to say, rather than every single different or every single different integration problem is a brand new custom integration, how can we kind of leverage what we've done elsewhere in other projects and other workflows so that we can reuse it as much as we can across our workflows or across our integrations. So then things like, we always jump into Azure Functions. That's a really good extension point. And then the part that I like is custom actions. So we're able to, create a whole series of these. And then in terms of how I went there it was really from the 4 next statements. So I'd put some 4 next statements in Logic Apps and I go, gee, they're running slow. And then how can I improve that? And that's where I got to. And so then I sort of started to explore these custom actions and things. So we have our concurrency control, so the number of threads that you'd like to have running on these things at once in terms of the workflow. And then in terms of our C, I've just put C# here, it doesn't have to be, but C#, .NET, it's a regular project, it compiles to a DLL. You can have all your NuGet packages in there that you want, that you need. So for example, in the HL7 world, I added some HL7 type NuGet packages, PDF managers, creators. And if you've ever done anything with PDFs, they can be a little bit tricky where they need more system resources loaded, fonts and other things to complete document creation. So we can do that in Logic Apps as well. And then one of the big things is that the parameters are serialized between the Logic App and the custom project. So what I tend to do is always just create every Logic App project has a custom extension added to it. Okay. Last little bit here will be the exception handling piece, and that is that in C# in our code we love to say, throw, I had an error here, this is bad, and that's what we should be doing. However, in the Logic Apps world, it doesn't translate nicely into the Logic App and says, oh, you've got an error on line 33 of this. It just says there was some sort of problem calling that remote shape. And you're like, oh, okay, so I've got to look somewhere else. So what we want to do is be able to, we return success, but elsewhere in that response is the actual error message. So I'll show you that just pretty quick. All right, so let me rush, well, not rush. Let me show you a couple of demos. And I had to restart my machine before I presented, and we've got wonderful. Yeah, I haven't dared to upgrade anything because I did do that before one presentation, and nothing really spectacularly worked after that. Okay, so in terms of what I've got 4 workflows there. Oh, can't see me. Why is that, Obi-Wan? Oh, okay. Let me quit the slideshow. Thanks, Dan. Is that the right one? No. Yeah, maybe it's that one. Let me quit. Quit. All right. Back. Don't worry. I'm doing the screen gymnastics out the front here. All right. So over here, I can share all this with you after the talk. Don't worry. I've got 4 workflows in there. One's a stateless, one's a stateful, and then I've just got something that takes a little bit of time that goes and processes the PBS, which is a pharmaceutical benefit scheme. In other words, all the drugs that are government subsidised, just to give you a bit of a real world example. And then I had one that does exception handling, which is what we want to see, which is the exception demo. And then up the top, I've got some of these custom custom actions, and in terms of a basic one, oh, this is going to get me, isn't it? Yeah. Let me sort this out. No, down. Thank you. I don't. This is the one that you get just straight out when you say create new project. So for those of you, I know it's lots of code, apologise, but that's the basic one. We add them to our workflows. Now, here's a little tip, and that is that when I open all this up, what I want to do is go and build them. So I build a lot more than normal, and the reason is, no red. The reason is that sometimes the derivations of what you've built get lost when the workflow is going to bring it, when the Logic Apps project is going to bring them in. So it doesn't understand all the custom actions and things that you've got. Or if you update the parameters on those custom actions. Okay, that looks good. And I'm just gonna show you what a project would look like. Oh, yeah, I'm not. Oh, yes, I am. Come on, designer. All right, so here's me sticking to that paradigm I mentioned before. We've got to, call some sort of basic function. I get a result back, and, we can, I just say return the function output. There's a whole raft of other things that we can do. Let me just get this up and running. I can set a breakpoint, which is pretty cool too. I can set breakpoints in them and get them, stop on those breakpoints while that's spinning up. I'm just going to show you. I'm going to pick one. Or I'll pick one. Okay. So I'll pick this guy. And what I did was just leave some of the basic code in it so that you'd sort of see that I didn't really change it too much from the sort of the wizard. The part there at the top on line 34, your custom actions so it gives you a fully fledged C# area that you can add that's repeatable into your workflow projects. You can add them into a NuGet package, into a company NuGet, or your own personal NuGet that says, hey, use all of these, and suddenly, whammo, you've got 50 ready to use. So what I can do is then bring them all into this area, and I can start to, and I just want to get a little bit more, but line 34, I can actually read environment variables. So if you think about your local settings or your connection strings for some of the connectors, a SQL connector if you want to do something quite clever, or something else, you can just pull them out of the environment. You don't need to have, create a whole raft of other sort of settings for these. And then if I can go to the right just a smidge, yeah, that's what I wanted. And that sorry, apologize, go there, there, thank you. So in terms of the parameters that I want to use, if I'm going to take messages out of the logic app and handle them in my code, I can use JSON object, I can use JSON array. I can also return objects back to the workflow. So what we tried, and in this project, which I'll share, try and have the same response coming back from all your custom actions, in the sense that it's a base response and we all sort of inherit from it, so that there's a status, there's a message, there's a description, there's a type. And then we can return back the actual instance data by making it just an object. So when you're back in the workflow, you can deal with the object, which could be, a drug list, it could be an exception list, it could be a raft of things. So, you don't have every single different shape that you call doesn't have to have a different calling paradigm, which is really, really handy. What else? That's about it. There's lots that go on in here, and apologies, has it started up? Okay, so great, I've started up. Let me just do one. Oh, let's not worry about. Yeah, every time, I know. It's a bit like when you play FIFA. It asks whether you want to learn English again. All right, at the very beginning. All right, so essentially I've got, this is Postman. I've got two folders here. One is for my local development, the other is for it's being deployed, and I've got it deployed elsewhere. And then this is essentially my local, I'm just going to call this, it's going to run. I've just got a message that I passed to it, which is basic. It's test, it's come back, and it's kind of given me some results around that basic sort of custom action. And then I do want to just show you quickly this one, which is, let's go there. So I've got this thing that says go and create an exception. And then down here in the similar sort of thing, yeah, how good's this, right? Don't worry too much, it's just a snippet. But, oh yeah. Look at this, right? See that WF details? That's a parameter which is the workflow object in Logic Apps. It tells you the name of the workflow, and it tells you the instance number, that 08 blah, blah, blah on line 22. You're gonna love it when you see that, because then you can go to the portal and you can go, oh, I wonder what this was, put it in, and it goes, there it is. And then there is a way that you can make that all in one hit, but that's a good place to start. And then I've got some error details in there that says, hey, this really bad thing happened on line 51, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and that's coming from your C# code. So it's not hard to, nothing's hard to do there. And I'll just show you that workflow just really quickly, and then I'm going to get tasered at 20 paces up here. Oh, wrong one. Hang on. Oh, this was another project which We didn't start with the interface table, did we? No, look at that. WF was the, I wanted to give you that as an example, but let me just open up this designer quickly. I'm wrapping up, promise you. Yep, 2 minutes to go, I know. Okay, so I go and call something in this piece, go and call something really exciting. We don't know what it is, but just think of it, it's really exciting. Then on the way back, it says, it examines the response and said, you know, do we have an error? So that call succeeds, right? We go and call some C# code, it succeeds. Elsewhere, maybe down below in that, you know, when we go and call the custom action, we call some other subclasses and things. Down there, maybe a really bad error happened and it bubbles up to the custom action, and the custom action captures that in a try catch and then transforms that exception into the payload, into the response payload. I know it sounds really good, but it's really simple. And then that just comes back as a successful call. The reason why I do it that way is to give the workflow the context of what that exception was. If I don't do it that way, if I just let the exception bubble up, the workflow just says something bad happened over there, 500 error, and you go, what happened? And he goes, well, you got to go ask that person down there in another logging department because something happened. So what I do is return that exception back, and then we do the Arnie thing of terminate, and I just take that function output and essentially go, well, something bad happened in that response. Let's just make it a 500. The reason why I make it a 500 there is so that when you're looking at the executions in the portal, at least it has a red X against it. You just don't see an all green and go, well, it looks good on my side. And the customer's going, well, where are all these messages? I'm not getting anything. Oh, they're all green. So I do that, and then down here, I basically go to the unhappy path, and there's a little, has anyone returned exceptions out of Logic Apps? Yeah, there's a bit of work to do, right? And you're like, surely, you know, where is it? Surely someone's gone away and done it. And so what I did was just write another little custom action, which essentially goes and gets out of the results. So I pass in the results object into this thing, which is another sort of serialized class, and say, tell me what failed. And then just go through and return that back. So it's all there, more than happy to share it with you. And I think my time here is up. So let's just jump back. Wonderful, thank you. And look, apologies, a little bit rushed, but you can have all the code. I'm around, love to have a chat about, you know, whatever you're facing. It's always good. There's no one way to do things. Hopefully, you know, you've learned a little bit about how I do it. You know, I can talk about Logic Apps now. My therapist says I'm doing well. I've had a lot of challenges. So thank you very much for your time, folks, and enjoy the conference.